Making your own bread is one of the best ways to avoid the additives that go into many commercial loaves today. And the aroma of freshly baked bread in your kitchen is one of life's real joys. Many people enjoy the process of baking by hand, while for others, a bread maker is a modern convenience they wouldn't want to be without. But we often hear from Which members who have been carefully following the recipes of their bread makers, but have been disappointed with the results they've been getting. So we've travelled here to Patrick Moore's award-winning artisan bakery to find out what makes a great loaf of bread and how to avoid any baking disasters. So Patrick, what makes a great loaf of bread?
Well, a great loaf of bread really, as made from a bread maker, is something with a good crust, you know, that's nice, evenly well risen. It's got a lovely dome top, a nice thin but crisp crust, open texture and a nice mouthfeel. This is a good example of a seeded loaf, and you can tell texturally from where it's come from. It's risen about double in its size, which is an indication that it was baked at the peak of its rise.
And what are some of the common problems people encounter when they make their own bread?
Well, I've got a couple of examples just here. This is quite a good example of what might be considered as a not very good loaf. You can see it's very pale. It really is too firm.
It's really airy.
A crust as well. That's due to a recipe imbalance. Has been too much water, and also it's been baked on too low a settings.
And what about this loaf here with a very sunken top? I don't think too many people would be happy with this loaf. What's happened here?
Well, this is actually a recipe imbalance as well. This is where there's been too much yeast added at the beginning of the mix and the fermentation. And what's actually happened is the loaf has actually come up, but because there's been so much action going on, it's actually sank back down into itself during baking. It's also been baked on too high a setting, and really the crust on it is would be too thick, and it would be really difficult for somebody to get their teeth in.
And this one doesn't look too appetising either. What's happened here with this one?
Okay, so with this one, we've actually cut into it, and we can see that the texture at the top is slightly lighter, but at the bottom it's really dense and really quite inedible. You'd find it difficult to get your teeth through that, you know, because there's been not enough liquid in there. The machine hasn't actually mixed it properly, so although the top is slightly lighter, the bottom is extremely dense.
So what's the problem with this loaf?
Well, actually, there is no major problem with this loaf. At first sight, you might think, well, you know, that looks a bit like a brick, but this is actually a loaf that's made using 100% rye flour and some beer from the brewery next door to our bakery. So the reality is, rye loaves do tend to have more of a flatter appearance. And this is actually quite a good example of a rye, because you can actually see the marks where it has risen from, and it's risen about 50%, which for 100% rye flour is quite phenomenal, really.
So to avoid these problems, how important is it to follow the recipe that you get with your bread maker to the letter?
To begin with, you have to have a start point, and the recipes provided with most bread makers are a good starting point, but what they don't take into account is the flour that you might be using. Now, the absorption rates of the flours that we use in the bakery can vary anything from 55% to 85%. So I think it's important really that we start from somewhere, and what I recommend to people is to stick to one good kind of flour with a high protein content to begin with, get that one right, and vary the amount of water that they actually use for that flour. You know, if the loaf is too dense and it doesn't have that lovely dome on the top, and it seems restricted, then increase the amount of water, and if the loaf looks too open textured and maybe is pale, then reduce the amount of water. You know, most manufacturers and millers actually do give an indication on what amount of water to use for their flour. I would always follow the miller's recommendations over and above a generic recipe that would come with the machine.
A great loaf has a crisp crust, is evenly and well risen, has a nice dome top, an open texture, and has doubled in size. Baking the loaf on too low a setting results in a pale, open texture. Too high a setting will mean the crust is too tough. Adding too much yeast means that the loaf rises too early and then sinks. Adding too little water might mean that the ingredients aren't mixed properly, creating an uneven, dense texture. Too much water might result in a texture that's too open and airy. Flour absorption rates vary. Use a high protein content flour and add the miller's recommended amount of water.